My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm the education coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center in East Hampton, New York. And we're located in an area called the Springs. We're a national landmark, and we're about 100 miles east of New York City. And today we have a very special program. It's called Inner Space and Outer Space. And we have a special guest artist, John Torreano, who's going to share his art and also give us a little tour on Zoom live of his studio in Sag Harbor. So to get us involved with the theme, what do we mean by inner space and outer space? This is the name of John's exhibit that's up right now at the Parish Art Museum in Watermill. So when I think of outer space, I think of the celestial realm, the cosmos, the planetary aspects, stars, and so on. And I realize that when I meditate and go within, it's almost like I become one with the universe in a sense. So it's sort of like the macro and the micro come together. So let's see how modern artists, including Pollock and Krasner, how do they investigate this theme? So I'm going to do a brief PowerPoint share to get us inspired by this theme and grounded in history a little bit, okay? Now, I selected some of the most iconic artists, beginning with Van Gogh, Starry Night, 1889. And of course, this is early modern art. So Van Gogh is hospitalized. He's in an asylum. He had a breakdown, and he's looking out of his window. And then he paints this scene somewhat from memory, but also imbuing it with his own imagination, his spirituality, his inner life, and his emotions. And he says, be clearly aware of the stars and the infinity on high. Then life seems almost enchanted after all. So I think most of us have had this experience, of course, where we look up into the night sky and we see the stars, and especially if you live in an area where there's a minimal amount of light pollution, like the East End of Long Island. And we have a feeling of sometimes awe and peace, and even sometimes a feeling of being connected to our spirituality. Now, in Van Gogh's painting, of course, the color becomes exaggerated. The actual size of the stars look like they're exploding, so it's filled with imagination. And also there's movement and rhythm and pattern, and the brushstroke becomes prominent. This is a work by George O'Keeffe, 1917. This is the beginnings of abstract art in America. And George O'Keeffe, of course, was inspired by nature and observed nature very carefully. But then she abstracted nature into her paintings. This one's so different than Van Gogh. First off, the paint is translucent. And it's really interesting that she actually creates a grid out of the night sky and the star. Okay, so George O'Keeffe says, try to paint your world as though you are the first man or woman looking at it. The wind and the cold, the dust and the vast starlit night. So modern artists, she says, the cold and the wind. Modern artists become interested in painting things that are invisible to the eye, painting all the senses through the visual art, right? So cold is not something you can actually see. How do you convey that in painting? And of course, Kandinsky, one of the early abstract artists, the world is full of resonances. It constitutes a cosmos of things exerting a spiritual action. The dead matter is a living spirit. Now, Kandinsky writes the spiritual in art. And because he is one of the first abstract artists in the West, he argues the case that what reality is not when you look at something and you observe it and you paint the form of something or the likeness of something, right? The reality of life is really in the spirituality, the energy, right? And the force that unifies all things in the universe. And this, of course, relates to theosophy, and now it relates to quantum physics, that all matter is actually energy. Of course, we have Miró, his iconic constellations. So here, Miró, he is really troubled. It's 1941. He's living in Spain. He's exiled. It's the rise of Nazism. And he looks actually to the constellations and to the world above for peace and solace. And he lets these images flow out of him. It also relates to surrealism, tapping into your unconscious and your dreams and letting an image flow and emerge out of the space within, and also literally in this case, the space within the canvas. And of course, when you look at Miró's work and all modern art, it's so much fun because it's all about your perception. So you might literally see some constellation forms in here, or creatures, or little beings and stars and moons, and you could look at it again and then see something completely different. And that, of course, is a key surrealist idea. So Miró says, the spectacle of the sky overwhelms me. I am overwhelmed when I see a crescent moon or the sun in an immense sky. In my paintings, there are often tiny forms in vast empty spaces. Empty spaces, empty horizons, empty plains. Everything that has been stripped bare has always made a strong impression on me. And again, this links back to the idea of spirituality, right? Where many spiritual practices have this idea of emptying your mind, right? Here's Alexander Calder. And what is he doing? He's actually taking these lines and he's drawing in space with wire and sculpture. He says, the first inspiration I ever had was the cosmos, the planetary system. And in this case, this is one of Calder's early works. It's motorized and it moves, it spins. So the viewer is walking around the sculpture, then the sculpture itself is moving. And this, of course, leads to his mobiles that are moved with air or wind. There's no longer a motor. He is the inventor of the popular mobile, right? And I think when I was thinking about this, I was like, yeah, that is really interesting. It's like we're moving around the planet is spinning, the planet is rotating, but we're always experiencing the cosmos in a sense through our own movement, right? Our own perception. And Alexander Calder, here's a photo of him with Jackson Pollock on the beach. So all of these on the East End, all of these artists knew each other, not Miró necessarily, but Pollock would have been strongly influenced by Miró and the other artists who were prevalent at that time in the media, at the Museum of Modern Art, in discussions, meeting with each other in New York City on the East End and so on. So they were sharing these ideas. And this idea was literally in the air, right? So this is an exhibit at MoMA. And here's a statement. The Museum of Modern Art will open. The purpose of the new exhibition will be to explain to the layman in dramatic and lucid sequence the basic features of air-age geography, the understanding which is essential to the winning the war and making a successful peace. So these ideas influence artists, right? Seeing new photographs. And here's Jackson Pollock. This was a photo from Life magazine, taken from an aircraft. And then you could see Pollock's painting above it in 1949. You can see a direct relationship. So Pollock takes this idea of painting space in an abstract way, but how is Pollock different? His art becomes much more physical. he begins to use the paint in a much looser way, dripping it, spilling it, creating lines in space like Calder, because Pollock is literally creating lines in space, not touching the painting. He's hovering over the painting, right? Working from all four sides. And Pollock's famous quote, energy and motion made visible, memories arrested in space. And Pollock's wife, Lee Krasner, also an amazing artist. I saw this mosaic table created around the same time. And I said, that's interesting. It has kind of a cosmic feel to it. This idea of rotating and things spinning and turning and so on. And here's one of Lee's action paintings, painting in which the inner and the outer man are inseparable, transcends technique, transcends subject, and moves into the realm of the inevitable. So all of these ideas, of course, when we talk about inner and outer space or any given theme, you can't say this is just one thing. You know, this painting is about one thing. All these ideas overlap. So I'm going to tell you, I am so excited to have John Torreano here today, because I went to the Parish Art Museum and I was like, ho hum, it's the pandemic, I'm worn out. And I walked into the gallery and I was astounded, because the paintings that are really sculptural spoke to me in so many ways, this idea of connecting the inner and the outer. And the paintings actually appeared in my dreams. So I can't wait to hear what John has to say. I am a fan, and I know we're going to all learn together, and we'll have time at the end for questions. So, and then at the end, if anybody has never been to the Pollock studio, if we have time, I'll take you in there at the end. Okay, so John, are you ready to speak? You can give a little introduction, and then when you're ready, you can share your screen.
Okay. It's interesting what you've been saying about Jackson Pollock and the abstract expressionists, because I basically cut my teeth on abstract expressionists when I was 18 years old. That's when I discovered that you could actually be an artist, you know. Being brought up in Flint, Michigan, the idea that you could actually be an artist didn't occur to me until I took my first drawing class with Richard DeVore and my painting class with my friend Bayless. Why am I brain? Well, anyway, two artists that came from Cranbrook. Anyway, as soon as I took that drawing class, I said, you mean people actually can be artists? And that was it. I became an artist. And I was immediately attracted to the abstract expressionists. And I think it was because I was a child of the war. I was born in 1941. And then 3 months later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So, you know, I didn't know how to take that. But throughout my childhood, the war hung over my head as a kind of a dark thing. And I would do many, many drawings of battles, you know, the Nazis on one side, the Americans on the other side with machine guns and then airplanes over. And I get it all set up. Then I would have the battle. You know, and I would make the blasts and color them and so on. So I realized in hindsight that being attracted to abstract expressionism, in addition to being me identifying with the rebellious and anti-reactionary nature of it, I already had built in me this desire to be physical with the artwork. One of the things that the abstract expressionists all had in common, as you suggested, Joyce, was they all went through surrealism to a certain extent. And surrealism destroyed it was about dream space. And Freud influenced this. And the dream space is a non-boundaried space. There's no boundaries between day, night, life and death. If you were to dream of a corpse, you wouldn't be surprised in a dream that it might get up and start talking. So the idea of not having boundaries started, and Miró definitely was one of the major artists to explore the idea of no boundaries. And Jackson Pollock, of all the artists, was the one that dealt with the canvas in that way, all the way around on top and back and forth. I mean, you could take many of those paintings and put them on vertically or upside down, it wouldn't matter. And when when you get out into outer space, it's the same thing. There's no horizontal and vertical character to outer space. It's this, you have to locate yourself in different ways. So I love this drawing of Galileo's, it's of the moons, and I put it in there first because it references the sphere, and spheres have continued to be part of my language. When I first moved to New York, I did a series of these paintings, which I've never shown actually. This one is 10 feet in diameter. My idea was that the masked off area, the squares, would close visually with the wall, the white wall. And that was my way of trying to integrate painting and architecture. And here's another, these aren't great slides. I had to try to, you know, scan them, but it gives you the idea. Then I wanted to make the bulging happen. So I got some French curves and I started to draw these to make it even more dramatic. You have to keep in mind that I'm a reactionary person. And at that time, when I first moved to New York, and it happens about every 10 years, I would say, there's this anti-painting thing, is painting dead, right? There was also the Greenbergian idea that photography forced painting into this position of not being involved with reproduction of images. And so therefore he had rules for painting, the idea that painting should only be what painting could be and not what photography could be. So it had to be abstract, it had to be flat and so on. And you know, I rebelled against that. I said no. In fact, I remember putting down on my notebook, less is less, more is more, no less. So I wanted to go just in the opposite direction and try to do as many kind of dimensionality things as I could. Whoops, it's not going forward for some reason.
No, it was,
there.
oh, there you go.
Yeah. So this is an example of me teaching myself how to make the illusion of a bulge. And also it's a globe. This is my first plaid world done in 1968. So I had these giant, in order to do these, I had to make giant French curves out of masonite or something. And so I proceeded to, this is a good example. This painting is about 18 feet long by 6 feet high. And I have, it's called Trispace because there's 3 different ways of creating an illusion. The banded arcs that are opaque on the top, the wash at the bottom, which has some thick over thin classic traditional painterly methods, and then the dots in there that are being overlapped by the bands. Now, at this time, I wasn't thinking precisely of the dots as stars, but just I called it chemical space, and and I just I wanted to maintain a connection to abstraction and yet have high degrees of illusion. And the reason for my desire to maintain abstraction has to do with I accepted modernism, and part of modernism was this utopian idea that everybody has the same basic needs in the world, regardless of what culture they are in. They need food, they need love, they need, and so on. And in art and painting, abstraction was an attempt to be a non-identifiable, a universal language, not culturally identifiable. In fact, it became referred to in many ways as the international style for that reason. So I was attracted to abstraction for that reason, and I wanted to maintain that connection. Here's another version of that idea. So you have these three different kinds of space, the bands, the wash, and then the dots, different dots behind the green wash compared to the ones in front of the green wash. And so you could invest yourself in all the different torques of space. Then they, this is a good example of the kind of paintings I was doing. It's called black bar. So I would do things where I would have the dots inside of here and floating out on the right, but not out on the left. So that was creating a different kind of diagonal space. I put this painting in because it reminds me of my dad. My dad worked for Buick, and Flint, Michigan used to be a major General Motors industrial city. It was a thriving city for many years. And he worked in the 50s. He was working for Buick. And this is called Buick Spatial because the Buicks of that time had this typical Art Deco kind of sweep at the bottom. But what's interesting for me in this painting is, is the bottom, the white area, is actually bare canvas that was masked off. And anyway, so this is bare canvas at the bottom, and then there's bare canvas leaking through the top. So the bottom, you know, physically is the furthest point in the painting, as if you think of the painting as a very thin relief. But visually, it's the figure. It comes out in front of everything else. The little leaks of canvas up at the top, they're totally in the ground. So you have a figure and ground relationship manifest right in there where you can go back and forth. That's Pollock was perfect at that. He understood a dynamic relationship between figure and ground. So Ed Harris and his version of the movie, his paintings don't have any of that. Just want to point that out. In this one, you have the grid of the dots. You have the red grid, and then you have the black grid. And so if you just only look at the grids, you can see space that way. Then you have the dotted space, and then you have the wash space. So right at this time, I'm involved with you know, a figure ground, a dynamic idea that everything can be in the ground and in the figure, but also a contradiction going on, you know. Let me go to this next one. Here's a drawing in preparation for another painting. This is another example of that idea. This band on the right, that's bare canvas. The white dots go behind the illusion of the bare canvas on the left, but they go over the bare canvas on the right. So theoretically, you could look at that as a dynamic torque, an angular torque of the space. All right, this is a drawing for a painting called Sweat Beads Coming Down from the Brow of Space. And I was experimenting with psychedelic drugs at the time, as you might expect. But this has some of the dynamic as the other one. This corner up at the right is bare canvas. The white dots go behind the green shape and crawl out over the bare canvas. And the swipes down at the bottom overlap the white and so on. So you can get invested. There's also a grid pattern in here, 2 grid patterns. So you can get invested in this. At this point, I'm still not thinking of these dots as stars. I'm just thinking of them as a way to articulate space. This painting was featured in the Whitney, at the time it was the Whitney Annual, and it's called TV Bulge because it's it was finished the night that that we first landed on the moon. So it's an ironic thing that happened. This one, this is bare canvas over there on the right that these things are leaking out on. And here's another one from that era. There's a painting I'm looking forward to showing you, this one. And in this time period, I had a breakdown, not unlike like Van Gogh, and a severe depression. I was sleeping 18 hours a day with fantastical escapistic dreams, only to wake up in an incredible self-esteem despair. And this went on, I have a chronic problem with depression, but I've overcome it. And, but at this time, this was very severe. For about 3 months, I could barely move. And I was able to crawl out into the space and make this painting one day. And it's 6 feet by 20 feet long, above and below. And I like to bring up this because when I was teaching, I would tell, when I gave talks, I would tell people, the thing about this for me is that it proves that your internal life, your internal state of your emotional state, depression, your positivity, your negativity, whatever, it doesn't take away, it doesn't add or take away from the intellectual aspect of the painting. It's a good painting, whether you're depressed or not. It's a bad painting, whether you're depressed or not. And to me, this is a very freeing thing, because it means no matter how you feel, you could still make a good painting. I just wanted to point that out. And so, same thing with Van Gogh. Van Gogh made incredible paintings. He had one of the most complex mark vocabularies of any artist ever. Him and Rembrandt, something about the Dutch, okay? But anyway, that mark vocabulary was built into his ability. It wasn't coming from his, which I think he probably had bipolar disorder or something, but it wasn't coming from that. It was coming from his ability to see. Oh, boom. Now I started to find that my dots were too predictable, too cliched. The spacing was 1, 2, 3 dance, And so I thought, God, I always believed the best abstraction for me, when I made the best abstraction, it was when I had an external something to look at that was particular. So back in the day when I was doing more, traditional abstractions, I would make an abstract still life just to force myself to come up with particular resolutions. I still think that, coming out of your head, it's going to be a cliched color. It's going to be a cliched corner. It's going to be a cliched overlap. You can't invent them out of your head the way you can, the way they are visually out in the world. So I'm thinking, where are there dots in nature? Bing, stars. So I started looking at stars, books, and so on, and I started to, sure enough, my distributions got a lot more interesting. And along with looking at the stars, I started to read about cosmology and astronomy, and I found that my ideas about space in painting were much more aligned with concepts of this astronomical space, the concept of curvature, the idea of warped space, and so on. And so I started to read about the Big Bang Theory, and I thought, this is amazing that you could have a shape. When you imagine the universe, where are you? You're on the outside, you see the universe as a ball of galaxies and stars blasting towards you, right? So you see it as a ball, which means it's kind of a thing, but you also are able to look into it illusionistically. So for me, that paradox of it being both a thing and an illusion that you can go into was important. And I stuck with that kind of contradistinction and concept of paradise. I don't know if that's the plural for paradox, but for the rest of my life. And this painting I felt I needed to bulge my paintings out in a similar way that I imagined the universe bulging out towards me, and also create the illusion. And I had this painting in one of my first shows in New York at Artist Space back in the day when artists chose artists, and Chuck Close happened to choose me for the show, and I did a whole exhibition of these bulging space paintings. This one, I put Magoo's in. People from the 70s will remember Magoo's. It was the go-to place for artists back in those days. And Tommy, the owner, would take art in exchange for bill tab. And so this was the one he had. Eventually, that place got torn down, and I heard that a collector in Japan bought the whole place and rebuilt it in Japan somewhere. So I'd like to find that someday. So this is a painting of space bulging out at us in the same way. In 1975, referring back to the Galileo image, this was an exhibition I had at Susan Caldwell Gallery of universe paintings. And so this is the first thing you saw. Then you went around the corner and you saw this room. So I hung all of these spherical paintings in the shape of a galaxy as best I could. And I thought I was being funny by implying that the universe, which is a one whole thing, could be plural. But now they actually have the concept of multiverses. So I just, I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. Anyway, this is a later continuation of some spherical paintings I did. What I liked about this idea was that it was a painting, it was an installation, and it was a sculpture all together. The idea of spherical paintings went right up against Greenberg. Later in the 50s, I realized when I was making diamonds and I had this exhibition of 100 diamonds at Jamie Wolf, it didn't dawn on me that I had already done this basic idea back in 1975. Whoops. This was 77. It's called Begin because it's the beginning. It's me imagining the beginning of the Big Bang. And this one is called Dark. It's actually when I first heard of black holes. So that's 1977. And I wanted to do a black hole painting. Not quite bulging in the same degree as the earlier ones. So a small 12-inch painting, maybe 10 inches, called Cluster, in celebration of a cluster galaxy I found an image of. Then I did a whole series of images that were more me trying to act out the imagery. So a lot of these actually come from the images directly from the Hubble, not the Hubble, because that wasn't out yet, from the astronomical photography. And so it's made up of gems and dots of paint. So it's kind of like a form of pointillism, but sort of like beans that have been soaking overnight, you know, expanding. Oh, I keep forgetting that's not working. This isn't a great image of this, but it's based on a spiral galaxy. It looked like God took a, you know, a giant spray paint and went droop like that. This is a big painting in a Dayton museum, Dayton, Ohio, and it's very big. It's probably 9 feet square. I had to do big paintings for big ideas, but I also took a lot of pleasure in doing small paintings. I like the idea of doing an 8 by 10 inch painting of 50 million light years, you know, of space. But I was explaining this is my homage to Jackson Pollock and how I thought he would love silicone glue. And then I started using panels because that was in a more appropriate place to more mutable, immutable the way the gems were. This is called solare, which is a made-up word, a kind of verb for solar or sola for sun, and Brimstone is the title of this one. The gems are mounted to the canvas. We were talking about the issue of looking out and looking up, and people have always looked up for heaven or the future. You know, we think looking out, looking up is more future oriented, and looking down is more hell or past oriented. Like when I was studying Tai Chi, the teacher said that looking up was future, looking down was past, and you were supposed to look straight forward to be in the present. Anyway, that's how I was thinking of this one. This is a reference to the paintings I did back in the 60s of above and below. I like the idea of the below being the space and the above being the flare. I did 2 of these. This is another homage to an artist. Piet Mondrian's mum is what that PM stands for. And it was kind of honoring he in order to make a few bucks, he made these little beautiful small little paintings of chrysanthemums, and they would sell them for like $5, you know, and he put together enough money to pay his rent with that. And I thought that, and they were probably amazing, you know. I bet they were really beautiful, and I never seen one, but I know he did it. And so I did this in honor of him. And this happens to be in the permanent collection at the parish. And this is another version, another way of working in the same way. It's shrapnel. I forget which war we were involved with at that time, but I thought the idea of explosions and violence, I'm literally drawing with a circular saw and a router in this one and the other one. So the physical violence attached to attacking the surface is part of the feeling of this one. This one is an homage to Hitchcock and the birds, also done with routers and circular saws. One of the things about the gems and the function of the gems was that I discovered early on something that the dots would do in a series of paintings I did that I haven't included. You would move and you would see 2, or you'd move another way and you'd see 5, or you'd walk across them and they'd be winking at you as you went by. And what I liked about that is the painting is reminding the viewer that they are in a particular location at a particular time, and only they are able to see what they are seeing at that moment. So if the idea of the gem reinforcing a person's individual particularity was important, and also the idea that it engages you in a 3-dimensional way. In other words, I'm being essentialistic, contradicting what I said about Greenberg a little bit here, in saying that in order for a painting or an artwork to be important, it has to be able to do something you can only experience in life. You can't really see it in slides, or in this digital age, it's become, in my opinion, more important than ever. This is a painting of 2 clusters that I was fascinated by, 1 cluster for each eye. In this case, the tan ovals are actually the plywood coming through. So you have the reality of the plywood functioning as a figural element in the painting. Just a funny drawing. If you can imagine yourself as outside of the universe, by virtue of your location in your imagination, you are changing the very shape of the universe. It's no longer a sphere because you are a particle that's extending the shape into a kind of a cone. Well, if you can do that, you can imagine pretty much any kind of shape for a universe. This one is in the exhibition at the parish. It's called Double Spin, and it was inspired by an image of 2 galaxies that were going through each other. And I thought that was amazing, and kind of like 2 schools of fish going through each other. Each kid knows which school they belong to, you know. Each star in each galaxy knew which galaxy it had to belong to. There's a lot of things about underwater and outer space and also the unconscious mind that are similar. My experience in scuba, for example, underneath the water like that is the closest thing you can have to an daytime experience of a dreamlike space. There's no boundaries there in a way either. Of course, you can see the bottom a lot of the times, but in general, there's no boundaries and you're just floating like you do in a dream. This is a painting that was bought by the Corcoran. Eventually it was gifted to the, I think, the American University in Washington, I'm not sure. Another expansion painting, blasting out. This painting was in the exhibition in Boulder Museum, but not in the one at Parrish. Oh, this painting, this was my attempt to do the Milky Way. So the floating balls and holes and gems float in front of the panels visually, but they're very concrete in reality. So when you see the painting, you have this dichotomy between the illusion of floating space and concreteness. And I called it Little Animals of the World because I had a cat at the time that I sang a song, animals, 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 all the little animals of the world, which I sung to my daughter too. And then, but the original title was Who's Afraid of Fuchsia, Chrome, Turquoise, White, Beige, and Black Blue, a takeoff on Barnett Newman's painting, Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue. And I wanted to add to that. Ooh, whoa, hey, this is working now. Okay, this is one of the many images I've responded to, and it's an ultra deep field image from the Hubble. And it might, this painting, which is in the exhibition, also is, has the tan ovals that are the bare, how are we doing here time-wise? Oh, we're almost done. Okay, I better hurry up. A small painting of outer space, about 10 inches. This is an ultra deep field pattern that I based these paintings on. At the time, NASA was going to be, budget was going to be cut for its online thing. And all of a sudden they came out with these beautiful images of objects that were theoretically at the edge, very edge of our universe. And of course I had to do paintings of those. So I did these 3 paintings. One of them was in the original exhibition. Here is an example of an image of Carina Nebula from the Hubble. And then I would go through this process, if you're interested, where I would do little sketches to start teaching myself what the transfer between how it looked in a photograph and what it was in paint and drawing to be filtered through me, in a sense. So I learned by doing this what I needed to do on the large scale. So I ended up, this is a big painting, it's about 15 by 10 feet. I ended up calling those drawings, or my drawing process, rehearsals, because I was rehearsing the action, the same action on a larger scale I would do on the painting when it was on the floor and I couldn't see the whole painting. I actually, by the time I got to doing the painting, I didn't even almost have to look. I could feel what the shapes were. Here's another example. This was the image I was responding to. These are some of the rehearsals. And then you get the painting, which was in the exhibition. So some of the paintings are, you know, people that would be familiar with imagery from the Hubble would recognize them, and some of them are more abstract. This one is a lot of people would recognize the spire. Up at the top, you see the Eagle Nebula, which how many millions of light years across that is, I don't know. But I was fascinated with that. And so I started to do a whole series of these. I've done maybe 25 of these until I finally made the painting. Same thing with the star birthing region here. And I called this A Stars is Born. And I did a lot of these sketches. And this is me going inside of that space and looking out, imagine-wise, and exploring details. So by the time I thoroughly researched it in terms of a kinesthetic connection to it, then I made the painting. One of the more popular paintings. Here's a small little bulgy painting of that of those ideas. Here's another one. This was the image. This was the initial drawing, and the painting looked like that for at least a year. And I did a whole lot of these preparatory, and then this is in the exhibition. It ended up taking me 5 years because every year I would decide, no, it's not right yet. And I'd make a move on it, and then I'd think it was done. And then another year later, I said, no, but finally it's done. This was one I got obsessed with for a while. I've done a lot of works on this. It's called Dorados, also a birthing area. And I did a whole series of works on paper, imagining being inside, looking back out, or to the right or to the left. And then I did an installation. I also did a whole series of cubes, if you could imagine taking a cube out of space and hanging it on the wall. And so that's what I did there. Here's inside Dorados, and then here's one that's expanded out completely. And I've done, there's one of these paintings is in the exhibition. Anyway, I got fascinated by dark matter. To me, dark matter, which they have images of in the Hubble gallery, they're making it up. You don't see dark matter, right? So I'm thinking this is the astrophysicist making paintings, and I think they're pretty good. They're very biomorphic already. And so I thought they've done half of the work. So I started to do paintings with imagery having to do with dark matter and balls. It's a little one. There's a cube of space of dark matter. It's a little one. And dark matters collide. The idea of the collision is a collision in the mind, dark matter and dark energy. They're both dark. What do they have to do with each other? You know, it's a collision. Here's an image that I was very much attracted to. Why? Because it already has this concentric structure of dark matter. And that was the first stage of that painting. That was the last stage. There were many in between. This one is in the exhibition. I love the way this one works because it just blasts out toward you in some ways. And it has that concentric structure. You'll notice it's called Dark Matters CC. That stands for Cézanne's concentricity. Cézanne was able to perceive, you know, in a way, he was ahead of the surrealists in seeing the whole picture plane. And he even described seeing that it was concentric, that the patterns were concentric. You see the concentricity in these little almost target shapes. On the outside, on the inside, and right almost in the middle is the target. Anyway, that's where that comes from. Dark matters and hot stars. This one is in the exhibition. Then I did some funny gold dark matter balls in space. This is black holes that are gold leaf black holes. Is it small or is it far? So size differentiation creates an illusion, but what if it's small? Then is it big or is it close? So one is either far or small, and the other one is either big or close. This is the newest painting in the exhibition, Dark Matters, Dark Energy Collision, like what I was saying before, the two ideas of dark matter and dark energy in my mind are colliding. But I did, I did use imagery. This took a long time to make this painting. Those little oval shapes are gold leafed, so they function in a different way than than the gems, but they do a similar thing as the gems do. And inside Dorados panel, this is here's a series. We're coming to the end. This is a inspiration for a recent painting, which if we have time, I can show you here in the studio. Here's a drawing, preparatory drawing for this painting, which took a lot of changes. Another preparatory drawing for that painting. And then I think the last one is this one, which was shown at the Keys Gallery. It was a painting I had for many years too, and I had to redo it. And it came out, and I thought it looks like Cosmic Breath. I thought that was a great title. So now I want to do more Cosmic Breaths paintings. Okay, that's the end of the.
Okay, I'll tell you what, it was such a, thank you so much, everybody. Let's give John a virtual round of applause.
Thanks.
John, you have been so generous with your time and your sharing of your process, your work from the beginning to now. And everybody, go to the Parish Art Museum if you can. The show is up till February 27th. And to see the artworks in real life is just, it's astounding because they're so physical. And that's what I can't get over in your work, John. The way you take this idea of this vastness of space and this it's so ephemeral, and then you make it so physical.
Well, my idea
of the Big Bang.
One of the things I like and why I think painting will always be alive is we have like 40,000 years of examples that we can see today of marks and shapes that people physically have been putting on surfaces, right? From the cave drawings and paintings to the present. We have that all that time. And you can look at those and you can, because you have a physical body, they have a physical body, you can empathize with them, you know, and empathy, physical empathy traverses the time. It destroys the time. It's like I used this example once before about how a singer can hit a note that will make you have a tear, and it might even be in a language you don't understand. Why does that happen? It happens because she has a vocal system that she can do things with her vocal system that you can't, but because you have one, your empathy goes up to that note with her. And that communication that's happening is emotional. And I think in a way, that's the job of art too, visual art.
I agree.
To take people places they can't go by themselves.
Yeah, I love that. You said, I mean, yeah, art creates unity. Now, John, would you be willing to just give us like maybe a 3-minute little glimpse into your studio, or a 5-minute little glimpse?
Okay, that painting I was showing you, the recent one, that's right here. And unfortunately, my exercise thing is in the way, which I have to do every morning. By the way, they should give me money for promoting those. I've gotten a lot of people to get those. And then this is the other painting. And this is a continuation of the cosmic breath idea. And I just imagine being inside of a nebula or something of that nature and trying to convert it into a visual experience. Here, out in the other part of the studio, I've been, okay, see, if I walk along here, you can see how the painting sparkles, right?
Yeah.
So it's constantly reminding you where you are in relation to it.
Yeah, do you ever think, did you ever connect that at all with Alexander Calder with his mobiles? That's what it reminded me of a little bit.
Yes, I saw that exhibition at the Modern. It's really beautiful. It was really beautiful. It was really beautifully installed too. And this is one of my columns. I haven't put any of the column works in this, but if you remember the first bulgy painting, the column came out of the giant quarter round that I was making the bulges with. And in my mind, I put the two quarter rounds together and made a half round. And this is a column I'm just finishing up on with the gold leaf process. It needs some touching up. Here's another column. What I like about the column paintings is they are another way of my trying to integrate architecture and painting, because they can, by changing sizes, we talked about size difference, you know, which one is closer, which one is farther, and the big one is closer visually. I also like the idea that they are 180 degrees visually, so that no viewer has a bad view. You know, that you could be on the side and you have the same basic idea as the person in the front. Whereas a traditional painting, the window idea, you have to take your turn. So it's a little bit more democratic in philosophy, you know. Anyway, what else? Oh,
we are going to have to wrap up because it's getting late. This is outstanding. John's studio is located in Sag Harbor, and the Parish Art Museum is located in Watermill. I'm sure also at the Parish Art Museum website, you can probably get more information about the exhibit as well. And really, John, my biggest thank you, because I am a fan. I am an official fan, and I just so appreciate this talk that you gave and the sharing of your art. And I know everybody else did too. We're not going to have time for questions, but you know, I hope that this inspires people to want to learn more. So,
well, thanks for inviting me to do this. I feel honored to be associated with Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock, and you know, since I cut my art teeth on those artists, to be able to have some kind of reconnection is good for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And everybody have a beautiful weekend. And you can visit pkhouse.org to learn about our other programs we have coming up. We have other guest artists. Next week is Eric Dever. We have art workshops where we do hands-on. And